Okay, so we're back at it, still reviewing for that MAAP science test that we know is coming up in early May. Last week we talked about DNA and proteins and mutations. This week we're going to focus on reproduction and that mitosis, and then on Thursday we'll hit up meiosis. Okay, so for reproduction, we know that all living things, they need to reproduce or create offspring, and they can either do that by asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. Now, there's only one letter difference, but that one letter means a whole lot because that prefix a means without. So the easiest way to remember the difference between the two is asexual reproduction is when an offspring is created without sex happening. Kind of gross, but whatever. And sexual reproduction, of course, does need that to reproduce. So when we're looking at asexual reproduction, only one parent organism is needed, just like this picture right here, and they will produce identical offspring without meiosis, which again, we'll talk about meiosis later on. So with asexual reproduction, there are no mixing of the genes with any other organism. So this little bug, germ, whatever it is, this little germ is going to completely copy 100% of its genes and just pass it down to its offspring. So the offspring or the children of this living thing are going to be completely identical to the parent. On the other hand, with sexual reproduction, you have two parents, and they are both going to contribute a sex cell. So for males, it's going to be a sperm cell. For females, it's going to be that egg cell. They are going to both contribute a sex cell to create a genetically unique or genetically different offspring, again, through meiosis. So you're going to have the genes of a male and the genes of a female combine to create an offspring. So the offspring or the kid will have a combination of the genes from both the parents, so it will not be completely identical to either one of them. Great. Now, focusing in on that asexual reproduction, this is a major throwback. We haven't talked about this in a hot minute, but there are different types of asexual reproduction that different living things use. Us humans don't really use asexual reproduction to create offspring. That would be weird, but different living things do. So for example, this top section up here, fission. So the prefix bi just means two, and fission just means to kind of split off. So all that's happening here is the parent bacterial cell will copy its DNA, and then it will eventually split off and make a new offspring. And it happens very quickly. It's kind of scary. This other one up here in the top right corner, this one's my personal favorite. It is called budding. This is when, again, that one living organism will copy its DNA, and instead of really just splitting, it will literally grow a little buddy off of its side. Kind of creepy. So this is a hydra. It's a very teeny tiny living thing that lives in like lakes, ponds, the ocean, and to create a new offspring, it just grows a little buddy. Imagine if a person did that. I would have a little Miss Long growing out my side. Kind of creepy. But again, this new offspring of this hydra is genetically 100% identical. They're twins to the parent. This other one, definitely more common in nature that we see firsthand, is something called spores. So certain, in this case, mushrooms or certain plants with leaves have these tiny little, they almost look like beads. And these mushrooms are super tiny. They're like dust. But what happens is inside those little beads, which are called spores, they carry all of the new genetic information. So these spores will move from something that is already living and be placed somewhere else, and that will eventually grow into a new offspring. So these little spores coming off that mushroom will be placed somewhere and eventually grow into a new little mushroom. Very cute. And again, since this mushroom isn't mixing its genes with another living thing, the mushrooms are going to be 100% completely identical to that one mushroom because again, this is asexual reproduction we're talking about here. This last one is going to sound super fancy. You're going to sound very smart when you say it. It's vegetative propagation. vegetative, and I didn't even spell it right. Hold up. Ms. Long cannot spell. There we go. Vegetative, meaning think about vegetable. So we're talking about plants here. Think about veggies. And then propagation is just a fancy way of saying you're taking one part of a plant and moving it somewhere else. Propagation. So what's happening here is there are some plants, not all plants, but some plants, where if you cut off like a little branch, just like this, and replant it somewhere else, that plant will eventually kind of take root in the soil and grow into its own plant. Now again, since this plant isn't mixing its genetics with any other plant, it's just riding solo, this new plant here is going to be 100% identical to the plant that it came from. So again, that is vegetative propagation, and then we just talked about spores, binary fission, budding. These are all different examples of asexual reproduction. Here's your cheat sheet for really mostly asexual reproduction. We'll revisit this cheat sheet because we're going to talk a whole lot more about sexual repro once we hit up that meiosis. So for now, really just focus on, I'll even cover it with myself. Just focus on the asexual reproduction keywords here. So whenever you see a question and it's saying, which one of these is an example of asexual reproduction, make sure you focus on the fact that it has just one parent. They're all identical, no genetic diversity, meaning no genetic differences. Again, they're all identical. It happens quickly. Bacteria use it, again, with that binary fission. And then up here, we've seen this table 1,000 times. This shows the advantages of both types of reproduction, but especially right now, we're focusing on asexual. So we know that it's quick, that's a good thing. It doesn't require a partner or a mate, so again, just one parent, and doesn't require complex structures, which again, we'll talk about on Thursday. Okay, second half of our review today, and again, this is all stuff that we have seen before multiple times, so I'm kind of going through it quickly, but we'll really get into the meat and potatoes of it, really get into it tomorrow when we practice this stuff. So if I'm going too fast, just pause. And don't worry, we'll really practice it tomorrow. Okay, so we are going to move on to this process that we know, that we love, I know we do, called mitosis. So I want to zoom out here and really focus on the purpose of mitosis because you might easily get lost in the sauce with all the complicated words, but it's really serves a great purpose within your body. It's super important. That's why we learn about it. So your body is made up of millions of cells, right? Your skin cells, hair cells, there's cells in your fingernails. Everything's made up of cells. However, those cells, they don't live forever. So whenever you're born, when you're a baby, you have a certain amount of cells. You are not made up of those same cells. Your cells actually will die within your lifetime pretty quickly and are replaced with brand new fresh cells, okay? So that process is called cellular division, or what we normally call it mitosis. And we call it cellular division, again, I can't spell. We call it cellular division because the cell will divide in order to make a new cell. Okay, so like I said before, mitosis, it's really used for replacing dead cells, or if you get injured, like let's say I get a paper cut and I cut myself open and I'm bleeding a little bit, your body has to repair that, right? You don't keep that paper cut forever. So in order to repair or replace those old cells that are now injured, your body goes through mitosis. And it's also for growth. So obviously, you're not the size of a baby forever. You get a little bit taller. And you do that by creating more cells. So that's all what mitosis is about. Here's the picture of mitosis. We've seen it 100 times. We're about to talk about the different specific steps of this process, but we know at the end it results in 2 daughter cells, okay, 1, 2, and they are genetically identical to the cell it came from. So when my arm makes new skin cells, the skin cells that are going to replace any dead cells are going to be identical to what they are replacing. Okay, I'm not changing the genes in my arm, right? They're still my genes. They're not mixing with anything else. They're identical. Now, key thing here, This technically is a form. I know this might sound confusing because we're not really reproducing or creating a new offspring, but the cells themselves are making new daughter cells that are identical, right? So this is technically like a form of asexual reproduction because it's just one parent and the resulting daughter cells are completely identical to that parent. Last slide for us to fill in here. We have those phases of the mitosis, or the steps that the cell will go through to create new body cells through mitosis. Now, they're going to sound like super fancy words, and you might be like, I don't know how I'm going to remember these. You don't even have to, between you and me, remember the full word. All I need you to remember is the first letter of each word, and that spells PMAT. P-M-A-T. Just remember PMAT in your brain, and you should be set, you should be good to go. So the very first phase starts with a P, and that is prophase. So during prophase, your body cells are officially like, okay, it's time to go. We're going to start doing mitosis. So P stands for prepare. We are preparing to replace those dead or injured cells. So what happens is those chromosomes inside your nucleus are going to condense, meaning they're going to get really thick, and they're going to pair up. So they're going to double up and get real condensed and thick. So then we can move on to the second stage in PMAT, so that's the M. We are moving into metaphase. Now we remember what happens during metaphase because the M stands for middle. So those chromosomes, now that they're nice and condensed, are going to line up single file right in the middle of the cell. So M for middle. The next phase is going to be A, so anaphase. In anaphase, the A stands for away. So what's going to happen is you can see where in those chromosomes that are now duplicated, they're paired up, they are going to split apart. They're going to separate. So the A stands for away because they are literally moving away from each other in the cell. They're going to move to opposite ends of the cell. So A for away. And then we have the T in PMAT, which is telophase. Now the T in telophase stands for two nuclei, which is just the plural word for nucleus. So we have two different nucleuses or nuclei within the cell. So what happens is when those chromosomes are now separated, we're just about to split into two new identical cells, but before we do that, we need to put them into two separate nuclei because again, that's where the chromosomes live, right? They live in the nucleus or the brain of the cell. So before these little guys can split off and be their own little independent cell, they need to have their little home. They need to make a nucleus. So in telophase, T for two nuclei. Then this part is after we have all of mitosis, because remember, PMAT show the phases of mitosis. We have this thing called cytokinesis. And this has been a while since we talked about this one. With cytokinesis, this is when we actually finally make the split. These two cells are now independent. They're living on their own. They've separated. They are two new cells. And again, they are identical to each other. There is no difference between these cells. So definitely remember PMAT, P-M-A-T, P for prepare, M for middle, A for away, T for two. And then cytokinesis, make the split. Okay, and then we have our cheat sheet. This shows every type of way they could potentially show you. Let me move myself all the way over here so you can see. Every potential way they might show you mitosis on a test. Here we have two daughter cells kind of forming or splitting away from each other. So since there's two, we know that's mitosis. Same thing here, a parent cell making two cells. Here we have one parent cell making two, and then that one cell then creates two. We have a wound or an injury being repaired, and we know that's the purpose of mitosis. And then up here, again, we have the phases of mitosis, which we remember PMAT, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. Now this up here I think is what is really going to be key in helping us remember the difference between mitosis and meiosis. So when you see the word mitosis, we know it has an M, a T, and an S. So see MTS. I know this one's a bit of a stretch, but bear with me. MTS will make us think Megan Thee Stallion, who sings Body, right? We know it, we love it. Megan sings body, so we know mitosis makes body or somatic cells. It works. Mitosis also has a T in it where meiosis does not. So we see that T and we know, okay, T represents many things in mitosis. T for 2, because we're making 2 new cells each time we go through mitosis. And T for twins, because the 2 new cells are completely identical. They are twinsies. All right, that's everything for today. I hope it wasn't too much in your brain, but we're going to practice it tomorrow. And I think we've got this stuff down.